Hello, everyone. Today, here we are with our second part of the episode Stronger Than Stress How Resilience Rewires the Brain. And today, we are going to continue this amazing discussion that we had, trying to understand how our brain starts signaling pain first as something that is protective for us, also how many episodes of trauma we have suffered, and how all of those episodes are reshaping our adult stage, let's say. And we have to go back sometimes to these patterns and to these mirrors that we find in adulthood and reflect on what happened to us when we were children. So all of those things that are important to know, how this emotional resilience is not the problem, but is just a messenger and is just a system to give us safety, give us protection, and help us understand what is happening around us.
Absolutely. And I think we spoke about last time the importance of pain, and there's so many different ways of dealing with it, and whether it's physical, mental, emotional pain that we're going through. And I absolutely believe that a lot of the trauma that we experience absolutely informs who we become. And a lot of the times it informs purpose. It gives us that understanding of what other people are going through in order to support them. And I see that a lot in my line of work as well, David, where a lot of people, their trauma has birthed who they are, what they do, why they do what they do. And a lot of the times it has done that. And even if you look at it from a business perspective, like the clients that I deal with, your clients, especially those that are in the healing world or in all of this, is the you of 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And that becomes important because it's a great way of, giving back to the community. But if you look at it from an intergenerational perspective, it's a great way to stop the intergenerational patterns that is passed on from generation to generation. And it's not to say that it was bad. It's to say that, it's either healing that generation or releasing what needed to happen in order to keep us safe, because this world is very different to what it was even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. And what worked then doesn't necessarily work now. The one thing I've always said is feel the fear, feel the emotions 100%, and then let that go, because that's important as well, is knowing that it doesn't define you, but it's informed who you are. And looking at it as if you're looking in a rear view mirror, it's okay, I've just passed that. Now I know what to look out for, or it's given me a different skill in order to move forward in my life. But we don't drive looking through the rearview mirror or our side mirrors. We drive looking ahead, and that's important aspect of it. Yeah, what do you think?
I I already did a big research about this topic about vulnerability, which is related and
Mm-hmm.
linked to resilience, because many times we learn to repress our emotions, we learn to not healthy express them, and also even pain
Yeah.
we learn how to cope with pain and not say anything until it is the most tragic circumstance. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we make the scenery worse just by doing that, and not being able to be vulnerable is what deflects the system inside of us and raises the level of cortisol, raises the level of stress
Mm-hmm.
to a point where you can really provoke a much higher threshold. First, your threshold goes up.
Mm-hmm.
Second, you will damage your body in a more profound way by doing that, by not saying anything, by just learning to how to say, to just get up and move on like the old generations. That's something that we are struggling with. This,
Mm-hmm.
say, we are the generation that is in the middle of the fragility that nowadays
Mm-hmm.
is in the world, because now it's overprotection, and we are in the middle of the other point where people were not able to express anything and were really tough and strong, and this what's the name, these facades, these masks,
Mm-hmm.
these archetypes is the word that we created about male and about not being able to express your emotions as a man, and the feminine side also to be just shut down, to not say
Mm-hmm.
anything. All of those things are also related to this topic of resilience and how we cope with that by not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. You know?
Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely a beautiful place to be, right in the middle, because the future generations are, in a way, teaching us to be vulnerable. And we, in a way, are teaching them how to be resilient. So it's trying to find that balance in there somewhere, because I think it's important. Because I also think it's important not to sit in your emotions for a long time. And so there's so interesting, because I've been working through this thing, is like talk therapy is incredible. So seeing therapists and understanding what is going on, and there's many types of therapy and coaching, but where do we draw the line where it becomes reaffirming, and that becomes a story that you continue to affirm to yourself? Right. So it's I feel it's important, that is important to express that and to understand that, but I also think it's important to bring in that resilience and going, okay, where do we draw the line, and where do I stop, allowing that to define me? Where do I stop almost, I suppose, being a victim in one way? Where do I stop kind of like allowing it to define me, and where do I find strength within it? Where do I find that, okay, how do I overcome this? I think becomes important. And that can also be done through, I suppose, talk therapy. But then there's also a lot of traumatic experiences that we can also look at other, I suppose, modalities, like, looking at music therapy, where we don't actually have to talk and reinforce it, but allow that healing. Because a lot of the times, especially if we've been through something extremely traumatic, releasing it from a different perspective, or lessening that so that we can deal with it, becomes important as well. So I'm a great believer in using a lot of therapies, whether it's Western medicine, whether it's holistic medicine. I think there's a place for all of it. And I think one is preventative, but one thing is for sure, I think even us as healers, the journey never ends. And that's important, is how do we say in English? In Portuguese, it's como tu encaras, like how you face it, how you respond to it. And I think where we start to build resilience is how we start to respond to these traumatic experiences that then we experience in the future. And one thing's for sure is life is full of ups and downs. Otherwise, it would be completely boring. And it's
Yeah.
in that space of imbalance that we actually grow and expand and learn before we bring that into full circle, into balance again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that rationale, because we really have a big job as this intermediate generation,
Mm-hmm.
that, as you mentioned, we can change and reshape the new generations, and we can heal the trauma from past generations.
Yeah.
So are in this breaking point, let's say, of the two of them, and maybe what we can start doing is understanding how our brain works under
Mm-hmm.
these amazing circumstances where we face a lot of stress, first, in this part of our brain, it goes offline. When you
Mm,
are too much stressed, you take poor decisions, you have brain fog, you have low impulse control, and that's what we see in many companies,
mm,
in many corporate environments. People don't feel safe. People
yeah.
feel again judged, again just controlled
Hmm.
to a point where I thought that with the pandemic they were going to understand, but we are in the same point or even worse again.
Yeah.
Yeah. My partner was working from home for 2 days, and then her boss just asked, "Are you going to come to the office?" And she said, "If you want me to, but you are not there, so what's the
Mm,
point?" And
yeah.
human resources also start asking, "Are you going to come?" And they said, "Why? What's the point of going to the office if the boss is traveling and she can do all of those things from home? So
Hmm.
there's no point." But again, we are in the same place where we don't trust people, when we pressure,
Yeah.
where we create this amazing scenario and environment of stress. And what happens then in the amygdala, which is the regulatory organ or region of the brain that is in constant threat? It goes
Hmm.
hyperactive and it detects everything as a threat, even these kind of questions that they are supposed to be nice, but
Hmm.
they're just triggering you.
Hmm.
And what your body does is it creates anxiety, it creates
Yeah.
fear.
Hmm.
And under those circumstances, your hippocampus, which is
Yeah.
one of the regions for memory, is completely impaired. So you have difficulty
Hmm.
with memory, with the context, with learning, and that leads again into a loop of having
Yeah.
poor decisions, making your work not in a good quality, repeating tasks,
Hmm.
and we are in that circle in many corporate companies. So that's, I think, the biggest problem, that people don't understand how our organs work and how to make the environment more flexible so that we can really create something that is valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I've started realizing now that I'm taking this knowledge and wisdom for the last, I suppose, 10, 15 years of dealing with people into looking at bringing it into corporations is that we bring our patterns. So if you don't heal that pattern from one job, changing jobs, you're just going to draw towards you the
Yeah.
same circumstances because what we resist persists. And not only that, the other thing that I've started noticing is that when we have a difficult situation at work, usually that same type of archetype person you will find in your partner or your friends, and a lot of the times in your parents. So you will replicate the pattern that you've come to explore in many different scenarios.
Mm.
So it is important to even heal between jobs, between bosses, between relationships. It's important to do that work, to build that resilience, to change the patterns completely, and to do the inner work. Like, I used to come from a place of like, I don't need to like you to work with you, and that's okay because that's old way of thinking. But and people are like, we forget, we call our businesses babies, because they have a life, they have a frequency, they have an understanding. And I think that by trying to go back to the old circumstances, we're actually doing a disservice, not only to people, which are the most important assets that a business has, which they tend to forget, where people are working from empty instead of from creation and expansiveness. And the beautiful thing that came from working at home was that people tended to work when they were strongest. And I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if we mentioned this in our previous episode, but for me, to put in an 8 hour day, if I start at 4 o'clock in the morning, my brain is fresh. It is excited. It is ready. It is, creative. I'm more efficient because I am more focused. I am in flow. But if
Mm-hmm.
you made me start work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you're not getting the best of me. It's going to take me probably 2 or 3 times longer to do something because my brain is like working on empty, or my energy's like not 100% there, especially when it gets to like 11 o'clock at night. Like, forget it.
Yeah.
There's nothing there. Whereas some people, their brains switch on at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So that's where you get the best of those people, and that's where they are working the best. Right? Like, I was talking to a client of mine the other day, and she said, like, it's so hard to start at like 8 o'clock in the morning because my brain, I just don't feel efficient enough. So I
Mm-hmm.
work later because my brain wakes up in the afternoon, and then it just creates a pure quality of life. And then
Yeah.
there's an expectancy to work these hours, and there's an expectancy to ignore our physical well being because it's not valued at work,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't see the relationship between our mental health, our emotional health, and our physical health. And there's a lot more statistics showing how emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence, I suppose, and not spiritual as in religion, um, like actually affects profits. It increases profits. It increases that internal, pleasure of being at work, and creativity and expansion. And it's so, the other thing that I found brilliant is I went to a talk with Ariana Huffington, and I don't know if I've mentioned it on this podcast,
No.
um, a long time ago. And I mean, Ariana Huffington is the top of like the Huffington Post. And
Mm-hmm.
the topic of the title of the talk was Sleep Your Way to the Top,
Mm-hmm.
because of bringing in the importance of sleep
Mm-hmm.
into like the workplace. So she actually has two sleeping rooms, two nap rooms at the Huffington Post, so that you can take your power nap to recharge your batteries. You
Yeah.
know, in order, so her belief in sleep is incredible because she worked herself to that space of burnout, and that recharges your batteries. And I found that so forward thinking and so brilliant in that sense that it was incredible. And we're in this phase where it's like there's a belief system that we need to work ourselves to the bone, or if you're not smashing it until 3 o'clock in the morning, you're actually, it's brutal on your physical, mental, and emotional health.
Yeah. And it's exactly the opposite.
Mm,
The If you do less and you work in blocks of time where
yeah.
you discover yourself, where are you most productive, and we can be physically energized, and we
Mm-hmm.
need physical activity at certain points of the day, and during the hours of the day, let's say, you can have also peaks of cognition and
Mm-hmm.
intelligence and attention. And if you use those 2 or 3 hours that you are peaking your maximum level of attention, that's where you are going to create your best work in 2 or 3 hours, and that's it. And you
Yeah.
could do a lot of things in the other hours. And that's what people in corporate business don't understand, because when people have the time to schedule themselves in their homes and do chores and take care of children and then have 2 or 3 hours, they did much better work, I
Yeah.
can assure you, than today
Absolutely.
that they return already to many of the offices, and they are controlled like that, and they are into this stress environment. And why? Because we also have a domino effect
Mm-hmm.
between between our mood and our cognition. Both
Yeah.
of them are very, very intertwined. And this constant state of high alert is driven by the dysregulation of pain
Mm-hmm.
and trauma signals, which are
Yeah.
created again in those same environments. And those directly impact the daily functioning of our lives. And they create this um, trending, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
emotional dysregulation, which is pushing the gas pedal, as you were mentioning,
Mm-hmm.
until you don't have anything in your tank,
Yeah. Yeah.
until the sympathetic nervous system is stuck, and
Yeah.
it's just there are no more. I don't know how to relax. I don't have time, and that's the phrase that many people say.
Mm-hmm.
I still have a lot of friends that are in the corporate, and when I speak to them, they always say, "I don't have time." Uh, but that's a repetitive phrase that they use, and I said,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have time for you, if you don't have 10 minutes, if you don't have half an hour to do something, then I'm sorry, but you don't have a life. You
Yeah.
belong to your company. You belong to the desires of your bosses and of the things that they want you to do. And that's not a way to create productive or creative work. That's
Mm-hmm.
just that is going to create a very weak parasympathetic system that is going to lead to anxiety, to having panic
Yeah.
attacks. Many people now have panic attacks
Mm.
at the office. They
Yeah.
have depression. They feel numb or stuck. Nothing motivates them. They are not happy with anything, and they are irritable constantly, angry, difficulty to feel joy or connect with other people. No?
But they're also in fear because a lot of the times we left at that space of like, I can't
Yes.
move because there's nothing out there for me.
Mhm.
And that fear is real. Um, However, it's one of those. Sometimes we need to feel the fear and do it anyway, right?
Yeah.
And it's when we are the most fearful, I found, is just we're at that place just before that turning point in our lives. Because when we're releasing a pattern, when we're releasing a limitation, that control of that limitation tends to grip a little bit tighter.
Mhm.
And, and so, but that just means that when we are the most fearful, we're just at that breaking point of like moving over that hump. And it's the same thing with corporations in the sense that with COVID, we had a lot of freedom to find out what we like and what we don't like. We found a lot of freedom in looking at when we are most productive. And we looked at that space of, okay, I am, I've kind of like, I can't think right now. Let me go and quickly put in a load of laundry. So I don't have that as an open tab in the back of my mind. I can do that and take that mental break, and so we start to manage our lives in a way that is a little bit more fulfilling for us. And there were studies done because I used to work for this internet service provider many, many years ago, and they were absolutely brilliant. So we had a business continuity solution maybe about 25 years ago, where if something happened, we could all work from home. And
Mm.
we started doing these studies, and we found that people were more productive and they worked longer hours if they were comfortable in where they were at, because you're sitting there and you don't have to drive an hour in traffic. You'll be like, let me just finish this project. I'm almost done. And we
Mhm.
ended up finding that people were more productive. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody because some people need to be in the office, but it's learning to understand what works for your physical, your mental, your emotional capacity, and bringing in that own balance. But I think corporations, and especially ones with the older mentality that won't want to change, and there's a lot of people that are saying no, demanding. that they have still this, 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, or whatever it might be. And I think that that is important because we're starting to learn what works for our bodies, what works for our minds, what works for our emotions. And we're starting to ask for it because before we used to be afraid. And I think there's space for all of it. But I think we need to start understanding that we need to work from overflow, not from depletion. Because the other thing as well is there's a lot of turnover and that costs businesses money. So it's beautiful that I'm seeing that a lot of businesses are starting to invest in the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of their employees, because it's important and because, it drives the bottom line, right? Because to replace somebody in training and all the rest of that, those setbacks, where somebody's already gotten buy-in from the company, they already know what's going on, it's just expanding them. Who knows what they'd be able to create?
Yeah, exactly. When you are under pressure, when you are under threat, your brain is not at the level that it can be, and sometimes what happens is this loop I was referring to, that you enter into a state where you don't feel motivation at all,
Yeah.
and you just feel this kind of numbness, and for you it's the same. Going to your job every day is just, it's just a chore. It's just
Mm-hmm.
an obligation that you have to fulfill, and you go and sit there and do the least effort that you can do. You don't have the energy because you have mental
Mm-hmm.
fatigue due to the levels of cortisol that you already have. And that's what we see in many companies, and even in academia, teachers and students with this level of mental fatigue because
Mm-hmm.
they are not motivated. They are not motivated because we live in under stress. I was watching a documentary about Finland,
Mm-hmm.
and the way they work and the way they don't pressure kids to go into the schools until they have the development of the brain, because many times in most Western countries, children enter into the school system at 3 years old sometimes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And then they go on and they just have this pressure all the time. But if you delay this pressure, you give them more, let's say, more leeway, and you extend the curriculum that they have to learn, and they have more time to play, to be with their parents. And also in these countries, they have much flexible schedules where people go to work and they can go 4 hours and then do the rest at home, things like that, so that they can be with their children. They create a society that is the healthiest
Yeah.
because they have this flexibility, and they can also take advantage of these rhythms that we were discussing, of
Mm-hmm.
light, of darkness, of things that our body is, it's the natural way to work.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I love that, and I see that there is a change coming in the future where perhaps a lot of us will do contract work because of that.
Mhm.
So, and I think a lot of companies will eventually contract out work, and then we decide how long we're going to take, when we're going to work, how we're going to work, and then we deliver on what we're able to do. So I see that as coming in, which is extremely important, and it works out the best for all parties because it's based on what your delivery rather than being somewhere at a certain time. Which is, although, I mean, sometimes jobs have to be, certain jobs you have to be there at a certain time. But then if you're following your passion and your purpose, and then you're excited to be there, and there's that, and I've always said the balance for me is work hard, play hard, rest hard. And it's important to have that trinity. And when you're in the flow and you're working hard, absolutely allow it. Allow it to come in. I'm sure when you're writing the same as me, when we're in the flow, it's like 5, 6
Yeah.
hours can go by without, Like it's like no time has gone by. But then there's other times where we need that resting. We need that, playfulness. We need that joy that activates our creativity. But it's finding that, I suppose, that balance within ourselves, right?
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily like 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours where we tend to like, have a look at, okay, so it's like I've worked for 8 hours, now I've got to stop, and now it's time to have fun. Now it's like, no, it's like it's going at that flow of seeing what is needed and when it's needed to bring in that balance, which is, I think, is very important.
Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe these kind of systems can be implemented in smaller groups where
Mm-hmm.
they perform like a trial and error
Yeah.
exercise where they gather, I don't know, let's say 5 to 10 people, and they create this group. This is the control group, let's say,
Yep.
and they can just let them be and let them find their own rhythm and give
Mm-hmm.
them some projects or tasks, and then compare them to another 10 people group of these kind of schedules, control, stress, office hours, and the 9 to
Mm-hmm.
5 schedule, and see what happens. I mean, I think the fear that companies or investors have is I can't implement this system in my big company that is at 10,000 employees or more. Of course, you are not going to implement it like that. You just can do it by small sales, uh,
Mm-hmm.
perform an exercise, create this system, and see how it works, and see the kind of work that this control group of flexibility can
Yeah.
give you, and then
Yeah.
you will see the results. No.
And absolutely, but it's also calling forward the right people, right?
Yeah.
And allowing people to be honest with what they're doing. So, for example, I have a brother who really doesn't like, he prefers to work at night. Like, really, when everybody is sleeping, that's when he prefers to work, right? So, find that job that does that for you, that has that flexibility where you are at your best, right?
Mhm.
Like, offer those time shifts to those people, right? Because then they will all get on, or offer those, shifts to the people that it's in alignment with. And I think for us in applying for jobs, we'll tend to perhaps bend the truth or shift it because, we feel that we can't be honest, so attracting the right jobs for us is that important because there's an alignment in there as well. And it was so beautiful because I was talking to a very good friend of mine, and they're like, when I go for an interview, it's like dating. I want to make sure that I'm going to be married to this company, or to this person or to this manager. So I need to make sure that it's the right fit for me. And I was like, that is such a brilliant way of looking at it because you spend more time at work than you do at home. You do spend a lot of the times more time with your colleagues than you do with your family, your friends, and all the rest of that. So you do need to look at it from that perspective in building that resilience because then it's not so stressful. And there's good stresses and bad stresses that we need to work with as well. There's some stresses that are absolutely, work for us and are expansive. But there's other stresses for stress's sake that don't actually need to be there either.
Yes, and I think that we can probably go now and look at how these psychosomatic illnesses are created with this chronic stress, and how the statistics we have of these kind of diseases, because I think that people sometimes don't know what is
Mm.
happening in terms of the diseases that they can create with this level of stress. And that's why probably I will be optimistic that if they listen to this they might have some reaction. But for example, fibromyalgia is one of the most leading causes of this loop of stress and not regulating yourself. IBS, it's another one which we have
Yeah.
listened about, a lot of IBS with intestinal bowel syndrome. and chronic migraines. I have a lot of friends that have constant headaches and
Mm-hmm.
migraines, and chronic fatigue and autoimmune disorders. So those are the number five of the diseases that they can create just by not controlling the stress. And we add to that the the poor decisions that they take in their own lives. I
Mm-hmm.
think we can really pay more attention to this kind of statistics and diseases and burden that we create, because also when people are sick, they miss work, they can't do their own work,
Yeah.
and they will also create this, uh, let's say, drains in the economy
Mm-hmm.
of the company. And if you just, it's just like a virus that is
Mm-hmm.
spreading. And if
Yeah.
more people get stressed and then two or three missed because they are sick or they had a headache or they have these migraines, well, next week we will have six, and
Mm.
in next other weeks we will have nine, and like that
Yeah.
it goes up. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you mentioned with all of those is they are, on a spiritual emotional, they're a suppression technique. So either not expressing, holding on to stuff, not letting go. Um, it's perfectionism in the sense of things have to be perfect so that
Rejection, no?
yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of that emotional aspect to it that starts to affect the body. And the body's so incredible because we ignore the signs, right? Because we're in this space of fear and of stress, and we're on this hamster wheel that we can't stop it. So we're like, we'll sleep next week. I know I used to say this. I'll sleep next month, you know, that part of it. And when we're young, you can probably do that, but then you start to see it in the decades afterwards. They're like, oh my goodness, In Portuguese, we say, when your head doesn't think, your body pays for it. And
Yeah.
so I think whatever
Mhm.
happens, whatever we do in our youth, we tend to see it later in our life as well. So I think it's creating those good habits right in the beginning, I think becomes important. And I definitely think that when we apply for jobs, we need to interview the people just as much as they are interviewing us. And that becomes super important too, to see if they're a right fit for you. Because if they are, then you've got so much to give. And it becomes this beautiful relationship of giving and taking. And it's if you were to relate it to a relationship, a lot of people are like, oh, we have to give like 50-50%, but it's not. Could you imagine if both employers and employees were giving 100%? If we, instead of working this way, we were working together, if our purpose is aligned, if everything aligned and was supportive, how much faster, how much more expansive, we could be, how much more profit even we would, because we would be attracting that, right? We would be attracting those clients, we would be attracting those suppliers. It would be more of a collaboration rather than a competition, because that's the other thing that starts coming in, because our nervous systems are so taxed that instead of collaborating, we're become like these animals that are kind of like backed up into a corner because we're in survival mode. So we react instead of responding. And we sometimes end up doing things that we don't want to do just because we're afraid, right?
Exactly.
And it just creates that. And then we come home and then we express that to our partners, to our children. And we have to find a mechanism of releasing that, and yeah, through food and exercise and whatever it may be, it becomes important, but working through that is important as well. Looking at, okay, so why did this cause me pain or stress or anger or whatever it may be? It's like using that as part of that, okay, I need to listen to my body. becomes really, really important. But then there also needs to be a stage where we're going like, okay, enough is enough. Suck it up, get up, you've done it. What have you learned from it? What are you changing? How are you going to respond differently in the future? And let's try that. Right? It's very much that dance between the two, that becomes important to understand.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we can maybe summarize this into a cycle that,
Mm-hmm.
that we follow, into the steps that we follow when we create these seeds and these, let's say, self-destruction
Mm-hmm.
behaviors. No, the first one is to have any kind of trauma or chronic pain signal and not paying attention,
Yeah.
not saying anything, not don't repress your emotions, repress what you are feeling. Then you create this brain hyper vigilance in the amygdala. Then what happens is that you will have poor sleep, and your HPA axis, which is the one that controls all of these cortisol levels, will have a dysfunction. And of course, if you are not sleeping well, you won't have energy or memory or attention. And this leads to low mood and cognitive fog, which is having your prefrontal cortex offline completely. So that means that you are completely disconnected from reality and from your decisions and from creativity and from motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And then you increase the pain sensitivity and fatigue, and then you arrive to social withdrawal and isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And in the worst cases, we know what happens. People tend to go to the for the worst kind of circumstances, which are these levels of depression, levels of anxiety, panic attacks, and even suicide.
Yeah.
No,
So
so
you mean if I don't ignore it for long enough, it's not going to go away? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. In a long way, that's what I said. Yes, we can't do that because at some point the body is going to give you the bill, and
Yeah.
the bill is gonna have an interest rate that you don't wanna know what is going to be. So
Yeah.
don't do it. No, it's like spending money and not uh, having a saving account. No, you will
Yeah.
arrive to a point where you don't have money and you will get in trouble. So it's the same
Yeah.
with your money. No.
Absolutely. And it's like I was saying, we tend to ignore those little signals, right? That those colds, those headaches turn to migraines, and it's yeah, yeah. It's learning not to ignore that, and also, but I think it needs to happen not only in a work space, but in your relationships, in your friendships, in
Mhm.
all areas of our lives. We need to start looking at that. And the body is such an amazing machine that it does really, it's extremely resilient, but it tells you everything you need to know. It tells you where you need to heal. It tells you what is wrong physically, mentally, and emotionally. It's beautiful. I do a lot of somatic work with people, and it's amazing the thought patterns, the traumas that we've experienced, how they tend to show up later, and where in the body they are stored. And pain is a great indicator that is like, and I think I said this in the first part one, is it's a flashlight saying, hey, you need to look here. Hey, you need to deal with this here. What is it? It's time to let go of this, because if it surfaces, it's because you're ready to be free from it. So it lets that go, right?
Mhm.
And I've started more and more. I do this work. It never has to be an either or, it's an and. I can be healthy and be successful. I can be,
Oh.
financially wealthy and time wealthy. I can, it doesn't have to be an either or, right? One of the things that I say is like, If we were given kind of like 50 joules of energy and that was our currency a day, where would you spend that? Where would you spend that energy? Like, what would you do? And really look at, okay, where am I focusing that on? Right. And the other tool that has come out of a lot of the work that I've done is waking up in the morning and going, okay, what is the single most important thing that I can do today? Or what is, especially on the weekends, if you do have a 9 to 5, is going, what would bring me the most amount of joy today? What would I do? Or what does my physical, mental, emotional state need today? And then give yourself that.
Yeah,
Which
beautiful.
becomes
I think that,
important.
yes, you gave the strategies that we are going to need for the
Mm-hmm.
future to really cope and to really not live into this Pollyanna world where
Mm-hmm.
everything is beautiful and when we have the balance of everything. No, we will have difficulties, we will have up and down, but we
Mm-hmm.
need to understand what happens in the ups and what happens in the downs, and
Yeah.
how to detect these signals, how to interpret them, and what to do when they arrive, no? And you mentioned them beautifully. And in the scientific jargon, they are called top down, which is the cognitive, and is using this part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, to calm yourself and to talk to the survival brain and to tell it there's nothing happening. It's just your boss bitching.
Mm-hmm.
Let's,
Yeah.
and just shut him up or shut her up and don't pay attention to that. And your thinking brain can say and give examples that you can start calming yourself, breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Mindfulness helps a lot.
Yeah.
Cognitive behavioral therapy also, it's another strategy. And journaling, and the one that you mentioned, having this one single thing that you
Mm-hmm.
want to go for it, let's
Mm-hmm.
say one day, that's your cherry on the top, let's
Yeah.
say, because that's what is going to give you the motivation to continue and to not pay attention and not over punish yourself,
Mm-hmm.
no?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yes.
I think that we're the harshest judges, so we tend to punish ourselves quite often. And it's what I suggest for that is, yes, we all make mistakes. I don't believe in mistakes, but we all carry patterns that we're used to connecting with, and understanding that you do the best that you can with what you know at the time that you do. And when you know better, you have to do better. But it's not about punishing yourself for not knowing better, right? It's about drawing that line, because if you understand, the patterns you've been carrying, and not change them, then it becomes a choice. Because once something is subconscious becomes conscious, then you're choosing to continue that.
Mhm.
So it's important to say, okay, draw that line. I understand it now. And now that space of forgiveness for yourself and others, because others come to mirror a lot of things for us, drawing that line and going, okay, how am I going to respond to this in the future? How am I going to respond to it from a place that is happy? And a lot of my clients have said, okay, well, I'm angry and I'm kind of like, and I'm so sad at the same time when they go through these spaces of change. And it's like, anger gets a bad rep. Anger is fire. Anger is coming to tell you that there's something wrong. How do you use that energy to direct yourself in a way that is in alignment, right? How do you use that to say, you know what? Damn you, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to allow you to make me feel this way, which isn't even them that are, we're allowing them to make us feel this way. We need to take responsibility for our own emotions and our own actions and our own responses, and going, from now on, I'm going to respond from this place. But there's a space of forgiveness that comes in, because we are quite judgmental to ourselves, in our behaviors. But and it's not a cop out. So it's knowing that, yes, we've done the best that we can with what we knew, but now we know better. We need to do better.
Yes.
But it's that action of doing better becomes important.
Yes. And the other two
Mm-hmm.
parts is diagram that we have to
Mm-hmm.
follow. Now, what you mentioned also, somatic awareness. No,
Mm-hmm.
having these body signals as your safety for the brain and for the
Mm-hmm.
body, which is
Yeah.
telling you something is happening, pay attention to it. And you can heighten your sensitivity for your body with uh, just closing your eyes, breathing deep, and you can also practice EMDR, which are these
Mm-hmm.
exercises uh, like tapping
Mm-hmm.
and just feeling in your body these kind of affirmations and repeating them and tapping
Yeah.
into certain places. Also, vagus nerve exercises, breath work, and
Mm-hmm.
yoga. All of those
Yeah.
are strategies that you can use to feel more and
Yeah.
pinpoint, let's say, pinpoint your signals. No.
Absolutely. And next week we actually have a breathwork specialist that is joining us as a guest. But I'm so excited to hear what he has to say and giving us hopefully some techniques that we can use to support us. I know Andrew Huberman talks about bringing in that calm. That those two deep inhales and then one long exhale. And that has
Yes.
helped me and a lot of my clients as well in moving through that. So we'll talk more about that next week. But it's incredible. But really, using our body as the intelligent system that it is, I think helps us to navigate life in so many different ways. As long as we're curious and step into that space of observation. Why did that stress me out? What was that story that I'm telling myself? What am I making it mean? I think asking ourselves these questions tends to support us from a place of curiosity rather than a place of judgment. I think is beautiful, and it gets to the stage where life will show you where you need to make those changes, and the quicker we do those changes, I think the easier life will be, because otherwise we keep hitting our head against the same wall, right?
Yes. And that leads to the last advice that I can give is that you have to create a lifestyle that works for you. You have to start implementing habits, healthier habits of having time to do some kind of exercise, the one that you feel that you have more energy to do and have more motivation to do it. It's not pushing yourself on until you also create more stress with exercise. It's just
Yeah.
finding your own rhythm for that,
Mm-hmm.
finding time to journal, meditate, or have some kind of walk without phones or devices
Yeah.
and connect with nature. And I think, of course, that all of that will lead you to having healthier nutritional habits, no? And picking better choices instead of coffee and sugar. No?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's a good summary of this episode, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with this, I think we wrap up, and I think we leave space for this amazing guest that we are going to have next week. That
Yes.
is to talk about this breath work, and we are going to learn a lot of techniques of how to calm ourselves.
Beautiful. Can't wait to see you all next week. And if you have any questions or would like us to discuss a topic, please let us know. And David and I will talk about it from a physical, mental, emotional, scientific perspective, biological perspective, and hopefully let's all try and make sense of this.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And of course, I encourage you to subscribe to our channels and to share this episode. Thank you. See you in
Thank
the
you.
next one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.